Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Before we begin, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. The hospital smelled of lemon antiseptic and stale, cold coffee. The fluorescent lights cast sterile rectangles on the linoleum, as if trying to force geometry upon the exhaustion. Kelly had ceased to notice the small things hours ago: the ticking clock, the squeak of a passing IV stand, and still, the world made itself known in those tiny, persistent noises. She sat in the stiff plastic chair at the bed's foot, pressing her palms together, so hard the ache in her fingers mirrored the ache in her chest. Mark lay like a sculpted ruin. The monitors played their nursery rhymes in metallic beats and hums. One side of his face was swollen, the skin tight as if pulled by an unseen hand. Tubes ran like small white lifelines from his nose and throat to machines, their displays glowing with numbers she had memorized the shades of in the last half hour. The respirator whispered. A catheter taped to his elbow looked strangely domestic, like a band-aid for a mortal wound. He had been awake before, restless and agitated in that way patients get before the doctors medicate them into calmer states. He had tried to form words through the tape on his mouth. The nurse lowered the monitor's volume for privacy, and Kelly had leaned in, resting her forehead on the coolness of his. I want them, he managed, his consonants soft as leaves, his eyes, when they opened, were the stark blue of a winter lake. There was a clarity that felt punishing, as it only seemed to come in small, brittle fragments. Kelly knew the instant he said the name that this would be the thing that undid her. The kids, their kids, were both an anchor and a storm. They were also, wonderfully, the reason he got up in the morning, the reason he returned late from rehearsal, smelling of stage makeup and cheap coffee. Speaking their names aloud in an ICU made their private world agonizingly public. Which ones, Bade? She asked, her voice unsteady. She could have just said all of them, but she had to hear it from him. She needed the syllables to land like tiny, exact stitches. He blinked once, then again. All of them, he whispered. Matteo, Lola, Bacan, Gianna, Louisa, let them come. Kelly's breath escaped in a small, defeated puff, beyond the ICU glass. The city was draped in its own indifferent lights. Inside, though, time had thickened. The nurses moved with the practiced shuffle of people who understand how to manage a crisis with hands that don't visibly shake, but which are making rapid, unseen calculations. One of them, a woman named Teresa, whom Kelly had begun to dislike because her very competence highlighted Kelly's own helplessness, squeezed her shoulder. It's possible, Teresa said quietly, her gaze level and steady. We'll make the call. Visiting rules are flexible for family at the bedside. We will have to coordinate sedation levels and infection risk, but we will try our best. Kelly stared at the minute movements of the clock. She considered everything that needed to be organized in the next 2 hours. Phone calls, school pickups, medications, the way teens process grief through sarcasm and subtle actions. She pictured the children filing into the room, their expressions changing like the weather, from shock to bravery to numbness and back. She could see Mario's jaw clenching as he saw his father on the machines. She thought of Lola's hands smoothing the bedsheet as if in prayer. She imagined Dwakin's tendency to make a joke too quickly. Ganna, the baby, though not a baby anymore, holding on to Kelly's leg. Louisa's voice, as steady as a metronome, she called Mario first. He picked up on the third ring, his voice tiny, as if he'd been shrunk. Mom, he said. It's me, Kelly replied, failing to hide the thin thread of panic woven into her words. Can you come? You? All of you? There was a pause, a terrible silence that seemed to suck the air from the room. Kelly could hear faint static, like a radio caught between stations. I'm on my way, Mario said at last. I'm leaving right now. One after another, the others agreed. Kelly called Louisa, then Ganna, then Dwakin. They were like actors moving toward a scene they had not rehearsed. In these tense, small hours, family logistics turned into acts of faith. A neighbor called, promising to pick up Gianna from choir. A close friend offered to give Lola a ride. Matteo texted that he would cover Joan's shift at the coffee shop. These small kindnesses accumulated, until the idea of the children arriving felt less like a possibility and more like an imminent fact. Kelly told the nurses to get ready, to lower the bed, give Mark some pain relief, and make him as present as the equipment would permit. The doctors had cautioned her about overstimulation, about the infection risk when too many people gathered in a single IFU-coated room. But those risks felt abstract, flimsy things against the concrete, crushing weight of Mark's request. "All of them," he had whispered. It was a summons, not a wish. The doctors could warn of infection, but Mark was warning of something else. Running out of time. Mario came first, just as he'd promised. He pushed through the heavy unit door, his shoulders squared as if bracing for a physical impact. Kelly saw his eyes do the terrible math of the room, the bags, the readouts, the mechanical pump of the respirator. He didn't look at her, not at first. He looked at his father. And just as she'd predicted, his jaw tightened, a small, hard knot of muscle anchoring his face against the grief that threatened to pull it apart. Louisa was right behind him, her face pale but composed. She was the metronome. She placed a hand on Mario's back, a silent, steadying beat. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice quiet but perfectly clear, managing to thread the needle between normalcy and terror. She, too, looked at the monitors, her gaze sharp, already memorizing the numbers, trying to find order in the chaos. Lola and Dwakin arrived together, driven by a friend. Lola, who lived on her nerve endings, dissolved the moment she saw him. She made a small, choking sound, like a bird, and pressed her face into Kelly's shoulder. Kelly held her, her own body rigid, a dam holding back two floods. Lola's sobs were hot and silent, shaking them both. Dwakin, however, just stared. He stood by the door, his hands jammed deep in his pockets. "Well," he said, his voice cracking, too loud for the space, "he's finally found a way to get out of chaperoning the winter formal." A beat of horrified silence. "Dwak," Louisa hissed, her voice sharp as glass. "What?" he shot back, his eyes overbright with unshed tears, a furious, brittle energy radiating from him. "It's a joke. Dad likes jokes." "Not now," Matteo said, his voice low and final. He didn't turn around. "He'd laugh," Dwakin insisted, his voice smaller now, defeated. "He would." Gianna, the youngest, came last, holding the hand of the choir mom neighbor. She was still in her blue choir robe, looking small and profoundly misplaced. She saw Mark, a pale figure tangled in white tubes, and immediately hid behind Kelly's legs, just as she'd imagined. "Mommy," she whispered, her fingers clutching Kelly's jeans. Is that real?" "It's real, baby," Kelly whispered, her hand finding Gianna's hair. "He's just very, very sick. He's sleeping." The room was too full. It was full of their coats, their backpacks, their distinct, youthful smells of shampoo and snacks and cold night air, all of it clashing with the lemon disinfectant smell of the unit. They were a crowd, a living, breathing violation of the sterile geometry. Kelly looked at her children, this line of 5 faces, each a different, fractured reflection of her and Mark. They were a living history, and they were all here to witness, perhaps, the end of it. She moved to the bed, past her statuesque children. "Mark," she whispered, touching his good hand, the one without the IV. "Babe, they're here. They all came." His eyelids flickered. It seemed to take a monumental effort, but he opened them. The blunt blue gaze, no longer lucid, was hazy from the pain relief Teresa had administered. He couldn't turn his head. His eyes moved, slow and heavy, from one to the other. Kelly saw a flash of, not peace, but recognition, a knowing. His fingers moved, a barely perceptible twitch on the sheet. "Mario," he breathed. The name was barely a puff of air past the tube, but in the pressurized silence of the room, it was a shout. Mario surged forward, breaking his frozen posture, and grasped the hand. "I'm here, Dad. I'm here." Lola, gaining a sliver of courage, crept forward. She let go of Kelly, and just as Kelly knew she would, began smoothing the sheet by his feet. It was a repetitive, frantic, prayer-like motion, as if she could smooth away the entire situation,